Hola. ¿Cómo estás? I'm embarrassed to say that's as good as it gets. I'm afraid the rest of this transmission will be in English, and in pure Englishness, I will coyly apologize and move on. So my name is Tim Hart, and I'm Development Director for Oxentia Limited, a company that developed out of Oxford University Innovation Limited, the technology transfer company for the University of Oxford. Thank you to the Argentine Chamber of Biotechnology for inviting me to BioArgentina. I'm excited to be here. I get to talk about my favorite subject, entrepreneurship in the life sciences. We're scientists, right? At heart, we're all scientists here, yeah? I want to see some hands. Put your hands up. Raise your hands for me now. If you've got a background in science, if you did your first degree in science, put your hands up. I want to see how many scientists we have in this room. That's nice. Yeah, we're all scientists. So where did this entrepreneurship come from? We're academics, right? Let's stop talking about entrepreneurs. God, they're annoying. Their ADHD, their tantrums, their celebrity-like status, their love of capitalism, and now they're even running our countries. Entrepreneurship. It's not a proper job, is it? The South Africans, they have a real problem with this. In South Africa, entrepreneurship is regarded as a failure. It's a failure to get yourself a proper job. Of course, I don't really agree with this view. My thesis is different. I don't just believe that entrepreneurs have an important enabling role within our innovation systems. They practice vital skills, life skills that we all need, independent of our industrial sector, whether we be from the public or private sector. Why? Because our world is changing so fast. The skills of the entrepreneur are not only fundamental for us to benefit from exponential technologies, but for our future generations to survive and prosper in times when technology will impact our world and lives in ways that we cannot yet even imagine. Adaptability, resiliency, and a mindset of continuous learning. We need to focus on these. We must upskill in these areas in every corner of our society. Continuous learning. Imagine that. You're not done with education anymore when you leave university. Exams continue into retirement. Who would have thought that the skills of the entrepreneur could be the secret to how we future-proof our businesses, our economies, and even our societies? Well, that was it, really. I'm done. I've travelled halfway around the world to tell you something that you probably already knew. I'm joking. Let's tell you a bit more about Oxentia. So this is a company that started nearly 30 years ago out of the Technology Transfer Office for the University of Oxford. And we started off being called ISIS Innovation. Now, ISIS Innovation is after the part of the River Thames which flows through Oxford. It's got nothing to do with international terrorism. After a period of time, we got some experience in tech transfer activities, and eventually we built a business in supporting people outside of Oxford in innovation and entrepreneurship. And that company is now called Oxentia. So what do? Well, we focus on supporting entrepreneurship and innovation, and we do this in various ways. We train people in technology transfer officers, academics. We also do technology transfer for other universities in the UK and overseas. We advise governments at various levels on how to use innovation to drive economic growth. And we also roll our sleeves up and practically help projects, companies, academics to move their technologies into the real world and into society. Let me tell you a little bit about entrepreneurship at Oxford. And we think it goes way back to the early 1900s. We think this is our first spin-out company. It was developed by an academic called Bryna Owen, and Professor Owen was just appointed as director of the Agricultural Institute at Oxford. And he'd invented an apparatus and a process for which you can dry sugar beet. And so he wanted to sell his equipment and set up a business to do this. A few years later, £22,000 went missing from the research institute and appeared in the company. Professor Owen was fired from the university. A few years after that, the company realized that actually these patents were fraudulent. The technology was never going to work. So the company sued the university for £750,000, which was over 7 times the entire annual revenue for the university. But there was a settlement made at about 10% of that figure, and the government had to bail out the university from this problem. Our first spin-out was a disaster. So we formed ISIS Innovation Limited, and within the first 20 years, this was our first generation of Oxford academic entrepreneurs. You could call them a group of mavericks. In fact, they would take that as a compliment. These guys were going to do it anyway, but the important point to make here is what drove them to do this activity. And what drove them was an opportunity to find research funding in other areas apart from the public sector. This was a way for them to drive their research from the private sector. I'll give you one example, Professor Steve Davis. Steve had developed a process by which you could produce a single enantiomer of a drug molecule. And that process was behind the company that became Oxford Asymmetry. Steve, as an academic, didn't need ISIS innovation, technology transfer help. And for certain, he didn't need any venture capitalists to come in and help him support this business. He was going to do it on his own. So he went to his bank, he got a loan, he put his house up as a guarantee, and he started this business. Within 4 years, the company was profitable, and eventually the business sold for £300 million. We think Steve is one of our favourite and best examples of an entrepreneur. Moving forward to today, Oxford has had some recent successes. For the second year running, the Times Higher Education World University Rankings have put Oxford at the top. We feel very fortunate. For the second time within the last 4 years, our technology transfer office has been recognised as the best technology transfer unit in the world. And we're lucky enough also to have a fund within Oxford which claims to be the largest venture fund in the world focused on a single university, with a fund of over 600 million to fuel and commercialise technology from our university. Let me give you a couple of examples of some of the biotech businesses that have developed out of Oxford. And one of them is Oxford Nanopore Technologies. You know, this was a technology that has been incubating for the last 20 years within an academic and commercial environment, and only recently has produced a product. And the product is a USB device that plugs into your laptop that enables the sequencing of viral DNA within seconds and holds the potential to sequence an entire human genome within hours. This is a business that's raised over 250 million and has a current valuation of over $1 billion. It's one of 3 biotech unicorns in Europe. Immunocore Limited is a company that started to commercialize its technology way ahead of its time. Timing's important. 20 years ago, that company, this technology was commercialized through a company called Avidex. It got so far, it was bought by another company, and then the timing is now right for this technology to come into the market. This is a technology whereby we're developing a new class of biologics that have the ability to redirect our own immune systems to kill cancer cells. This is a company now that is generating revenues and engaging with the pharma industry. You'd think this company here, Natural Motion, isn't really biotech. It's something to do with the video games industry. But the research came out of zoology when there was an academic trying to understand and animate how animals naturally move. And the application here was in trying to get more natural movement of people in video games. 14 years later, the business sold to Zynga for $527 million. It's our biggest successful exit from a university spin-out in Oxford. It claims to be the most successful university exit in the whole of Europe. And do you know something? At the point of sale, there were no patents. There were no patents. What does that tell us about the value of patents in commercializing research? We need to take a broader view. University now and our tech transfer office doesn't talk so much about patents. We talk about ideas. We don't just focus on spin-outs, but we talk about startups too. We take a much broader view in our outlook. What do we think drives academics to engage in entrepreneurship? Money? For what? They use the money to fund more research. Because it's part of their job? Is it? Is that what they're there to do? To put a ding in the universe? Yes. We want those academics to make a difference. I believe we do it for the people. I believe we do it to realize socioeconomic impact from publicly funded research efforts. We have a duty to do this endeavor. And what about my experiences in entrepreneurship? I remember being 19 years of age, second year undergraduate, and I met this postdoc. Her name's Jane, that's all I can remember. Beautiful, tall, dark lady. And in a lift, I said to her, Jane, if I'm lucky enough to do a PhD, what happens next? And she said, well, you can either become an academic or you do a postdoc. And? No, that's it. That was disappointing. My encounter with Jane. I was lucky enough to go on a pioneering program at the time, a biotechnology business plan competition for undergraduates. It was a hoot. I won a prize. I never won anything in my life before. This awakened my passion, the mindset, the fire in the belly. And I guess I realized this is what I was supposed to do. So for the next 15 years, I founded and developed 2 biotech companies, one focused on environmental diagnostics, and the other one, which eventually licensed technology from MIT, on trying to grow a real human liver in a dish. And this was providing drug development and testing tools for the pharma industry. What did I learn? I'll pick one thing. Taking other people's money is not an achievement. It's just something unfortunate we have to do in our industry. But please remember, it's not about how much money you raise, it's about what we do with it and how much value that we create. So what's the problem? I'll tell you what the problem is. Our innovation communities are not productive enough. We need to find ways in which we can turn more great research into great ideas. I'll tell you a story. There's a student at Oxford who was studying a new lattice theory or model for how we create more aesthetic and more safe building structures. And he made the lateral connection. He made that leap to suddenly think, hey, this technology could be used to personalize bicycle helmets. So he came to the tech transfer office and we helped him and we turned this concept of his research in a totally different area into a great business opportunity that continues to grow. In fact, his technology was used in the last Olympics for the Great Britain cycling team. My colleagues often tell me, you know, in England you seem to be just good at the sitting down sports. You can do the cycling and the rowing, but when it comes to the proper sports, you struggle. We need to facilitate more creative thinking in our academic communities. We need ways in which we can turn more great science into great ideas. We need our academics to stop knowing more and more about less and less. We need them to seek inspiration and application from more diverse corners of academic worlds. What we need to see is more transdisciplinary research. Let's combine STEM science with human and social sciences. Let's bring out new innovations that can impact the world. I think creativity is behind a lot of this. Behind creativity is imagination. Everybody has mentors, yeah? If you're an entrepreneur, you have a mentor. I got some mentors too. They're my kids. They're 2 and they're 6. And I'll tell you why. I believe one of the keys to making our academic communities more productive is to drive more creativity, more creative thinking, more transdisciplinary research. And creativity comes out of imagination. We need to think more, yeah? Because this capacity, this truly open capacity we have to imagine, seems to be stifled when we get into adulthood. Our thinking and imagination becomes much more guarded as we grow up, when we enter an age in the workplace. Yet our kids' imagination is raw, it's unfettered, it's infinite. Where does this all go when we become adults? Kids don't care. They don't feel they have to be guarded in their thinking. They're not burdened with the fear of being wrong. They have a go. We'll never have any truly original ideas within our academic communities if we're not, and our businesses, if we're not prepared to be wrong. How is tech transfer evolving? When I started in this industry, we were scientists. Scientists talk to scientists. Yeah, we understand each other. We all have a science background. Moving forward, economists become really important. We need to understand how we can use the innovations out of our academic communities to drive economic growth. In the future, I think we'll have social scientists working in technology transfer offices. Our world is changing, but entrepreneurs like change. When we used to think about entrepreneurs, we think about scientists. We can now start thinking about entrepreneurs as empowering people. There are programs now all over the world. In Latin America, the Gifted Citizen Program, happening later this week. 6,000 people gather in Mexico and they announce a global gifted citizen of the year, an individual from somewhere in the world who has an innovation that has huge global social impact, can affect 10 million people's lives at least. These are the kind of innovations that we want to come out of our academic communities. Is entrepreneurship the most powerful mechanism for mankind to progress? Are we utilizing the framework of business and innovation to provide a platform where we can make a real difference in our communities? What about our future? Some messages to our universities. We need university management to get on board with the program that we're trying to deliver here and to work with us. This is a common barrier we find in different environments for a lack of progress. We need our universities to bring in things like sabbaticals for academic entrepreneurs. Revise your performance metrics. Be careful what you ask your academics to deliver on. A message to governments. We need a more innovative entrepreneurial approach to drive innovation and entrepreneurship. Governments need to be brave in the support they're offering. Don't let some of these barriers get in the way of trying to realize impact from research which has been funded by your people. The greatest future innovations are going to come from the most open, free-thinking environments. And long-term government support is key. If you're going to put programs in to drive innovation, the timelines are long. Get those programs isolated from political changes. The French SAT system is a great example of how 10-year programs can make a long-term difference. A message to our next generation. The students and the young researcher communities, you are our most powerful asset. Don't forget to use your universities to prepare you for life outside. You know, in entrepreneurial endeavors, those of us who have been involved in trying to drive, particularly biotech, in small private company environments know for sure we're driving research with no safety net. My goodness, how rapidly we can progress our research efforts in these unsecured, no safety net environments. We need environments like this. And to the young people, embrace the naivety of youth. People say, the majority of people say that have started businesses, that if they'd have known how difficult it was going to be, they wouldn't have bothered in the first place. Naivety is a great thing. Young people are full of naivety. Let's celebrate that. We need to explore more internationalization opportunities. We need to ensure that the innovations we're developing are not just there to support the lucky few, but are going to have global impact. Our vision for the future in Oxentia is to support environments in other parts of the world that are not as fortunate as our own. So we're developing programs where we can start to bring the physical, human, the financial assets from other environments to bear on places where the systems are not as mature as in other places. Now, our strategy is to focus on entrepreneurs, people like this. Here's a couple of academics I met in the Ukraine. These academics are world-leading researchers in a particular area called magnetocardiography. They told me they had a technology in their labs. It's a new cardiac imaging system. That's me on the right having my heart tested on it. Wow. There are technologies locked up, stuck in different parts of the world. We all have a responsibility to try and bring these technologies to the people that funded them in the first place. I'm going to finish now with something that 25 years ago motivated me as an academic. And 25 years later, it still holds true. And it's a quote by Theodore Roosevelt. It's not the critic that counts. It's not the person who points out how the strong one stumbled or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust, the sweat, the blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends themselves in a worthy cause, who, at best, knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at worst, if they fail, at least fails while daring greatly. Their place shall never be with those cold and timid souls that knew neither victory nor defeat. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hart. For the sake of brevity, we're going to ask only a couple of questions. The first one, let's say we have a scientist willing to start a new business. Would you recommend that this scientist associates with an entrepreneur with business experience rather than going on his or her own?
Yes, yes. The best practice that we've learned from our own experience is for the academic to find themselves a CEO, an experienced business manager, and that team works together to drive the early stages of the business. There are exceptions to this, and we shouldn't discount academics that show the potential to be the entrepreneurs themselves, but the favoured route is for an academic to associate with an experienced business manager, who are often in short supply.
And the second question, as a fund, how do you reconcile the long development times that usually these projects in biotech take with the necessity of the VC funds to have a return in a reasonable amount of time?
I think we've learned over the years that in order to compete in the investment community, we have to accept that we have longer time frames. But the impact and the economic activity that we're generating in the longer term through these businesses and through developing these industries has indirect positive economic effects. So I think that we talk increasingly about patient capital and the acceptance that we have to wait for longer time periods in order to realize returns from an investment perspective.
We have time for one more question. You mentioned in your presentation the need to facilitate more creative thinking. What would you say is the most important, or the 2 or 3 most important things that we need to be thinking about when we want to achieve this?
We need to get academics talking to each other more. We've run experiments whereby we've got social scientists together to try and address problems that business or industrial sectors have. And then we get a group of STEM scientists or engineers together and we ask them the same question. And my goodness, the potential out of the human and social scientists to address some of the innovation problems that industry has is phenomenal. And we're missing something here. And so concepts like creativity centers, programs where we bring these two groups together, are ways in which we can start stimulating and experimenting in this area of transdisciplinary research. Okay, thank you.